Welcome to week 4. Today we're going to be talking about stereotypes and attitudes. And I'm Professor Greg Long. And we're going to talk about this in a number of different ways, a number of different perspectives. But before we get started, let's do our disability etiquette question of the day. And the question is, what's the best way to talk to children about disability? So give that a moment. If a child came up to you and had questions, what should you tell her? What should you tell him about disability? How might you approach that? Some suggestions in terms of talking to a child about disability. One would be certainly ask what they know. See what kind of information they already bring with them. When you talk about the individual or you talk about the disability, talk about it from a kind of a strength standpoint, not look at all the things the person can't do, but more, look at all the things they can do. So strengths-based is very important. Be honest with them and also encourage them to talk about it, and from your standpoint, relax. The hope is that these etiquette questions that we've been going through over the lessons will give you a bit more comfort so that when someone does ask you or want to talk about this stuff, it won't seem quite so scary. Okay, so picking up now, when we're going to talk overall about this lesson, we're going to hit again the idea of the importance of language. We're going to talk about language and its effect on attitudes and how people with disabilities see themselves, because that's certainly a part of considering stereotypes and attitudes, societal's view of it, and then end up with a discussion of a little bit of what could be done to change attitudes. What are the most successful ways of going about and creating change? So when we think about societal attitudes, I do want to mention a few historical facts that some of you certainly may know about, others it might be new information, but if we think about it, people with disabilities have faced a very, very long history of discrimination, both here in the United States as well as throughout the world. Within the United States, for example, access to education. But it wasn't until the 1970s that a child with a disability, was guaranteed the right to go to school. Prior to the 1970s, roughly 1 in 5 children with disabilities was educated, with severe disabilities was educated. Many were not. So access to school has been, in the US, only, say, a 40-year phenomena. There are many other parts in the world where children with disabilities have no guaranteed access to school and have no accommodations made for them. One of the areas where we see particular discrimination, particularly historically, has to do with, so if you have a severe disability or if you have a mental illness, where do you stay? Are you part of the community? Unfortunately, in the United States, we have a very long history of institutionalizing people with mental illness. One of the most dramatic, particularly from a historical standpoint, portrayals of this is in a pictorial essay entitled Christmas in Purgatory. And with this, and you've got links for it in your activities for this week, a cameraman and a journalist went in, undercover if you would, to a variety of mental institutions in the 1960s and took pictures, hidden pictures, of the conditions that existed in those environments. And the conditions were horrific. You had people that were simply being warehoused, were laying around naked, were otherwise either chained or in straitjackets. Caused quite a stir because we as a society think of ourselves as being fairly progressive and wanting to treat everyone with consideration, and yet for that particular group of people, and a lot of these conditions, while improved in 2013, still if you have a mental illness, the opportunities and options for living in the public are quite limited. And then the final area as a historical kind of indication of discrimination is eugenics. And I know in talking to my own students on campus that many of them have not heard of this concept. But it was the idea in the early part of the 1900s that we could create a better stock of person, that we could, so much like you can grow a better flower, you can create a better breed of cattle, that there was a thought that we could create a better breed of human being, and that was the concept of eugenics. It's a practice that ultimately led to the sterilization of over 60,000 United States citizens for no other problem than the fact that they had a disability. So as a summary of this, I would just say as we look at this, that attitudes from a societal standpoint, very long history of negative treatment and lack of inclusion. So when you don't interact with people, creates the opportunity for stereotypes to develop, for certainly discrimination and prejudice to be practiced. So as we move into our next segment, we'll talk more specifically about, again, the impact of language on attitudes and stereotypes.